You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at myaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means it is Friday. It is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. Do you know where volatility is? Well, let's find out together. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-scintillating Options Insider Radio Network, coming at you across a broad array of platforms and devices and ways to listen. You want to get it after the fact on pretty much any device under the sun, then that's already out there for you on pretty much every platform. If you want to get it and engage a little more, want to engage live through pretty much most of our shows throughout the week, then you can go on the Plus. And of course, the Secret Club is for the folks who want all that, plus some more on the pro side, including exclusive shows like our great Q&A this week with Scott Nations. Check it out if you haven't already. If you missed it, then of course you can always go back in. If you're on the pro side, get the exclusive pro podcast feed and listen to that anytime you want. After the fact, of course, when you sign up, you can get access to all those ones you've already done. You can participate in all the future ones as well. Of course, you have oddities coming up a little bit later today to break down the week's worth of unusual activity and a whole bunch of other fun stuff. TheOptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more about that. And wherever you listen, however you listen, keep those questions and comments coming. We do love to hear from all of you guys and gals out there. And let's see who we have on the show today. Let's find out. First, let's go out deep into the heart of Texas, where we are joined once again by the greasy meatball, a.k.a. the volatility brisket himself, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball/Brisket, welcome back to the show, sir.
Hey, good to be here. Woo!
Ooh, we got a woo. Clearly, you're in a good mood today. You got a woo. What are you, Ric Flair?
A woo day.
We got Ric Flair joining us here on the show today. And also joining us, let's see, having some technological issues getting him on board. Let's see if we have him or if we don't. Holding down the MIAX hot seat today, our old friend, Mr. John Smolin, the Executive Vice President and Head of Exchange Traded Products over there at MIAX. John, welcome back to Volatility Views, sir. I had a feeling that was going to be the result. All right, we'll get him back.
Get him eventually.
We'll get him back on later. He wants to be fashionably late, as always. But you know what? The party can't wait any longer. Let's kick it off with the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Volatility Review, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down the week that was and indeed still is from a vol trading and trending and analysis and unusual activity and all sorts of perspectives out there. And, you know, coming into today, the narrative was wait for Powell, wait for Powell. Everyone was kind of spooked about Powell. Was he going to talk about tapering? Was he going to spook everyone? And the answer is yes and no. He did talk about tapering, and yet the market is apparently just shucking all of it off, not scared at all anymore. All the major indices firmly in the green. We've got the S&P up almost a full percent, about 0.9%. Dow up about 0.75%. So Dow playing the laggard role today. And the NASDAQ up nearly 1.2% on the day. So a strong day. So apparently, you know, the taper tantrum, call it what you will, the taper concerns that was roiling the market not too long ago. Apparently all that in the rear view mirror. Powell said today that economic recovery is continuing apace and high inflation. This is what always cracks me up. High inflation is just temporary. You know, obviously it changes. The outlook on inflation changes with Fed regimes, but go back to like the Greenspan days and that time frame. Inflation was it. Inflation was key. If they saw even a whiff, a hint of inflation, they were pumping the brakes. And, you know, some people took issue with that, obviously. But now we have kind of the polar opposite where we have rampant inflation. I was just down at our local gyro place the other day, been shopping at them for ages over here in Greektown in Chicago. Those gyros have gone up about, 20-25% just in the last couple of years. And that's just a gyro. That's just because they have to pay. Obviously, it's hard to get help these days. The cost of goods to make the gyro has gone up. So there's inflation across the board, real life inflation. And the Fed kind of saying it's just temporary. This is only just a pandemic. And also, they did talk about winding down their stimulus. They did talk about tapering. And yet all of that is kind of apparently being shrugged off. The Fed's price index hit a 30-year high, though their target is 2%. It's well above that now. And Powell said the test for inflation has now been met and that has also been clear progress towards maximum employment. So apparently the Fed likes what they're seeing out there. I don't know. Interesting times afoot. Mr. Meatball, let's start there while I work diligently with the producers behind the scenes to try to get John to sort out his technological issues. What are your thoughts here first on what Powell said, B, the market's reaction to it, and C, the resulting vol apocalypse? And let me just break down the vol numbers really quickly, listeners. Spikes coming to Showtime is at about a 16.5. That's down 2 points from last show. VIX cash also flirting around a 16.5. That's down 2 points as well. And VVIX at about a 108. That's down 15 points from this time last week. So, Mr. Meatball, after all this concern about Powell, it seems like it was a tempest in the teapot, sir.
Yeah, I mean, they sold it off yesterday and bought it back today, and VIX basically went nowhere. It's off mildly from where it closed on Wednesday. Markets are up across the board. Interestingly, the Russell 2000 is really the one blowing off the top today. The S&P is up about 0.9%. The NASDAQ a little up more than 1%. The Russell 2000, as we're recording this, is up 2.67%, a whopping 60 points. There are some movers and shakers in that index. I don't know, Mark. I know this is a little off topic from our normal show, but I feel like we'd be remiss if we don't mention support.com. SPRT.
We have talked about them in the past. One of our listeners on YouTube is huge on support.com. Whenever we talk about them, they come in with crazy comments on YouTube. So they'll love this.
Yeah, well, have you seen what it's doing today? It is up 160% right now. It's up $32.
So you're saying it's the anti-Peloton.
It is the opposite of Peloton. It was it was $12 on Wednesday, and now it's $52. My Robinhood trader on Wednesday did a 15-23 call spread. The reason why we did the 23s was because the 23 was the highest strike listed on Wednesday. And then this thing has just gone absolutely off the chains. And I'm wondering whether that's a part of the Russell 2000, because that would explain how the Russell's up so much. But we're seeing a kind of a resurgence of meme trading. We saw AMC blow up this week. We saw GameStop blow up this week. And then only to give it away. We still see softness in the Chinese names, like, Baba, Baidu. It's not a good time to own Chinese stocks. And, if we recorded the show since that rumor between SIBO and CME came out, I don't know. Did we?
We have, but I don't think I had a chance to chat with you about it. It kind of broke right in the middle of our options bootcamp show last week. So we kind of talked about it. Then, of course, CME very stringently came out and said, no. So it was kind of weird. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know that if I was CME, I'd want to own SIBO anyway. VIX volume is falling off a cliff. SPX volume, if they did buy them, they'd probably have to, sell off SPX. I don't know. I don't know that that's a great fit. I think SIBO still carrying a pretty nice bid from that pop. And CME can't seem to get a lift. And I know we're going to get into VIX and VIX options and spikes options, but man, it was an anemic week for volatility despite everything that went on. And I'm looking forward to digging in on that.
Speaking of spikes, I did hear from John. His power was knocked out by a terrible storm. He says he has no internet, no power, and no cell service. He can get texts only. So I guess we could text to him throughout the show. He could text us his comments. But outside of that, he apologizes, listeners. But he'll be on next week. So apparently some bad storms over there in, I do believe he's in the New Jersey area with a lot of the other MIAX folks over there. So hopefully your power is restored soon, John. We'll get you back on. We always like having you on the show. But you're right. That was a weird one, just to segue really quickly into the CME thing. I know Phil Stafford, not well, but I know a lot of the media who covered this space. I've interacted with him a number of times over the years. He's over there at FT. So when I saw an article like that with a lot of details about takeover price and share price and everything, and I saw his byline on it, I saw Phil Stafford, I said, okay, Phil usually doesn't run away with the bit in his teeth. It wasn't like maybe some of these other outlets, local outlets, where the reporters cover a million different things and don't really know the space, and they hear a rumor and they may run with it, not really know what they're talking about. Phil usually dots his I's and crosses his T's. And so when he came out with this and was so detailed on it, I thought, okay, there's got to be something to this. And then when CME almost immediately, which they never do, usually it's, no comment thing, when they came out completely on the other side of it and said, hey, no, this is completely wrong, this is completely false, that's unusual for them as well. Usually it's not that kind of response at all. So that was strange. And then Bloomberg coming out, and Matt Leising, another guy I know who doesn't really mess around usually gets his stuff pretty accurate and researches his sources, came out on the other side and said, no, this is not happening. Now we have this weird dance going on. So it seems like maybe someone fed Phil a little bit of false information, because we haven't heard much more about it happening since then. But a strange thing. And you're right. I said for years that, CBOE would kind of fit nicely into that pie that is CME. There's a pie, there's a little wedge missing and has equity and volatility in it. And SIBO could slot in there. At least they could have maybe about 5 to 10 years ago. It would have been a better fit then. Price-wise, certainly would have been a heck of a lot better. And also probably would have made some more sense to have that. And you're right. Now they have bats and a bunch of other things they probably would have to spin off. And certainly it would not sail through DOJ scrutiny the way the Board of Trade acquisition did. I'm sure, especially in the current political environment, they would take another look at the effectively One Chicago exchange coming to life. I know there used to be an exchange called One Chicago, but that was just single stock futures. This would literally be the One Chicago exchange, CME, CBOT, and CBOE all together under one umbrella and doing the lion's share of U.S. derivatives volume. That would probably get some scrutiny from the regulators. So I'm guessing, Mr. Meatball, it's looking like it's not going to happen, sir. So apparently all your dreams of the One Chicago exchange will not come to pass this week, sir.
Yeah, do you think CME wishes they would have just paid the $26 a share that the SEBA owners wanted.
Yeah, back in the day, yeah, that would have made a heck of a lot more sense back then, I think, than now with all the other. You got bats now, you got all this other nonsense attached to it that you probably don't want or probably can't have. And also, Terry Duffy has said many times he doesn't want to deal with the SEC. He'd prefer the CFTC. You can actually get stuff done there. You can't really get much done in the SEC and much larger, more bureaucratic entity. So if he picks up SEBO, you got to play with the SEC. So I think there's a lot of reasons why maybe they wouldn't want that. And their strident denial is kind of key to that. So what are your thoughts on that, listeners? Do you think it's not going to happen? Are you surprised? Does this not impact you? Trust me, if you trade derivatives, this will impact you in the long run if it does happen. But we'll keep rolling out here. Speaking of CME, let's get on out to the futures front first. I've been seeing a lot, and I was hoping we'll get John on maybe next week to detail more about this. But Simon's been hitting me up. Everyone's been hitting me up saying, have you seen the new records? Have you seen the new records? So it seems like every week and almost every other day, there's a new trading record out there for Spikes futures. And I keep harping on this because that's what you guys want. You guys have been asking me since we started talking about Spikes and Spikes launched. You're like, hey, I like this, but the options markets are a little wide. Well, guess what will fix that? Tighter, more liquid futures markets. And that's kind of what they're getting out there right now. They're putting up new record numbers. I won't say every day, but definitely every week there's hitting new records out there. So it's a strong growth out there for the Spikes futures. And that's only going to lead to better and tighter options markets out there. So if you're out there trying to work your orders in Spikes options, the spread won't be as intimidating. So the way to mitigate that is to get a more liquid underlying first, and then the market makers will step up on the options side, and hopefully we'll start seeing that. And that will be the way to start actually trading more of this stuff out there. In terms of trading on the futures front, let's get out to VIX futures land now. You might imagine that front portion of the curve getting shellacked. Coming into showtime, we had the SEP future down a little bit over 2 points, about 2.1 points, and the OC future coming in about 1.25 points. Mr. Meatball, what are your thoughts on the land of volatility futures this week, sir?
Yeah, the curve was really wide last week. It's definitely tightened up. It's still really wide. I mean, we are basically have what? 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks of VIX futures left. And the September future is still trading at a really nice premium to the cash. It's trading around 19, and the VIX is 1640 right now. Spike's pretty similar. And that's really big. And the back end of the curve in both Spikes and VIX remains really expensive. And I'm talking January. January is still just kind of insane at about 23.5 for the VIX, and pretty similar spread between Spikes and the Jan future as well. So that back end of the curve remains really juicy and pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, that's been kind of your focus for a while, is a little bit of the longer dated stuff. And it is interesting to watch. Speaking of watching, let's look on out to, before we even get to the options, you were talking about support.com earlier. The folks in our chat are all fired up about it as well. We got our buddy Luigi there saying he made a nice little overnight gain off support.com. He sold a put in it. So there you go. Well done, Mr. Luigi. And Mr. Unlimited also coming in saying he had a nice support trade a few weeks ago about the call verticals, made money and sold them. He said he missed this round. Hey, you know what? Never go broke taking a profit. We were just talking about this on boot camp, right? So be happy you missed it. So what? There's always more trades out there. There's always, especially these days, there's always another squeeze you could jump on down the road. You got to love when they blow through the highest listed strike on the options front. These are interesting times we live in out here. But support.com, $51.50, up a whopping $31 today. I've got a feeling maybe some of that might sneak onto oddities later today, so we'll stay tuned for that. Getting on out to the options front on the volatility realm now. We got Spike. Most of those options and Spikes rolled off the board in August. They have now been replaced by September. So let's do a top 5 in Spikes here. Number 5, got the SEP 50s, 5-0s. Number 4, the SEP 30s. Number 3, the SEP 21 puts. Number 2, the SEP 24 calls. And number 1 out there, the SEP 17 puts out there. Most of those around the 1,000+ level or so. And then we've got, going out to VIX land, not a heck of a lot of paper lighting it up out there. So Powell not really driving a lot of business out there one way or the other. It's at about exactly half of its ADV. The ADV is 401, so it's ticked back up over the 400K level, if ever so slightly. It's up about 9,000 from last week. And as of right now, it's closing in on almost exactly 200K, 197,000. So pretty much halfway there right now. In terms of the top 10 positions, what is dominating the OI out there in VIXLAND? What are the size positions that are open right now? Let's find out. It is 60-40 puts to calls again in the top 10. So read into that what you will. It was 50-50. It has been 50-50 kind of for a while. So a bit of a coin flip in terms of where the top 10 was leaning. These days, leaning a little bit more towards the put side. Let's see. Let's start at the bottom. Of course, number 10, 162,000 of the SEP 16 puts. Number 9, 164,000 of our first of 4 calls on the list, the SEP 30s. Number 8, 175,000 of the October 17 puts. Number 7, 180,000 of the SEP 18 puts. Number 6, $1.94 of the SEP 35 calls. Number 5, 196,000 of the October 14 puts. Getting out there and getting down there a little bit. Of course, if a day like today continues, we could be seeing a 14 not too far away. Number 4, 198,000 of the NOV 60s, so we're all the way up to number 4, listeners, and we haven't even broken 200K yet. Number 3, 221,000, get you to the SEP 25s. Number 2, 232,000 of the SEP 17 puts. And the number 1 position out there, 240,000 of the SEP 15 puts. Looks like a bit of a SEP vertical on the put side there for number 1. Used to be the number 1 spot. The SEP 25s has now been pushed down to number 3. Then, of course, they got my beloved NOV 60s holding out there at number 4 with nearly 200,000 of those. Total of about 6.75 million contracts open, about 4.25 million on the calls, and about 2.5 million on the puts. So overall, from the OI perspective, calls blowing the doors off puts, which is more along the lines of what we expect out there in VIXLAND. And in terms of action, let's see what we had on the tape this week. Not a ton of action, really, which despite the fact that we had some movement, some consternation in the broad markets, didn't translate to a lot of vol paper. Today, so far, about 179,000 contracts on the tape. The top 5 trades today, let's see. We've got the most active contract today, got the OC21s, the puts, actually. Those 16,700 of those, followed by 16,000 of the OC16 puts. Whole bunch of puts today. Number 3, the SEP 18 puts with about 15,000. Then we squeeze in a little bit of calls on the bottom of the top 5 there. 14,300 of the SEP 22s and about 14,000 of the SEP 25s. Looks like maybe a little bit of upside there in SEP. Going out to yesterday, the most active day of the week, 549,000 contracts on the tape. The most active contracted NOV 20s, 90,000 of those bad boys going up. Interesting. NOV 20s. I know the 20 line is attractive for a lot of you, usually a lot of your verticals, 2025, maybe 2030 out there. So someone getting in and getting the meaty part done on the NOV 20s to the tune of 90,700 yesterday. So that was a good chunk of yesterday's paper, followed by the OC21 puts, 36,000. Number 3, the SEP 15 puts, 25,000 of those. Number 4, the OC17 puts with about 22,000. Rounding out the top 5 on Wednesday, about 20,000 of the SEP 17 puts. A lot of love for the 17 put strike yesterday. Wednesday, pretty much what we saw the rest of the week, right around 250,000 contracts. That time was 265. The most active contract was the Jan 24 puts. Getting some Jan on the board now to the tune of nearly 27,000 of those. That's an interesting strike on many levels. 24, Jan. Interesting. I'm going to have to dig into those a little bit more. By the way, number 2, 17,000 of the SEP 18 puts. Number 3, 16,800 of the OC21 puts, followed by 16,000 for number 4 of the OC16 puts. And rounding out the top 5 on a pretty light day, right around 10,000 of the SEP 16 puts. Out to Tuesday, another day, pretty much right around 250,000 contracts. Of the top 5 out there, 16,000 of the OC18 puts for number 1. Number 2, 15,500 of the Jan 20 calls. Back out to Jan. So Jan 20 calls on Tuesday, about 15,000 of those. Jan 24 puts on Wednesday, about 27,000 of those. Interesting indeed. Number 3, we got 15,000 of the SEP 18 puts. Number 4, we've got 15,000 as well of the NOV 25s. And rounding out the top 5 on Tuesday, we had about 10,500 of the SEP 35s. Getting back out there on the optimistic side of the train. And Monday, another day, even less than 250,000, 221,000 on the tape. The most active contract, though, was fairly active, about 30,000 of the SEP 20 puts, followed by 28,000 of the SEP 17 puts. So again, a little bit of some vertical action, followed by 14,000 of the SEP 35 calls, 10,000 of the SEP 30 calls, and rounding out the top 5 on Monday, because why not, 8,000 of the October 70s. So Mr. Meatball, not a ton of activity this week, but a few interesting things to unpack. First off, how many of those Oct 70s did you buy? And then what are your thoughts on these somewhat funky put strikes in Jan? Well, the puts and the calls in Jan, 20 calls and 24 puts. And then anything else catch your eye this week in VIX land, sir?
Yeah, it was a really, really slow week until tomorrow. We literally saw 4 days in a row where VIX failed to trade 300,000 contracts. So SIBO can't be happy with what's going on in that product right now. That is not great, but a little more volume today, yesterday, little bit of an uptick, a tiny bit of an uptick today, but not a ton. The most interesting trade I saw all week was the buy of the January 24 puts. That was Wednesday, and it was basically synthetic future. They were getting short at 1902. They kind of probably making note of kind of the strangeness of the back end of the curve and trying to get shorted. So I thought that was a little odd. Aside from that, on all of these spikes, the biggest thing you'll notice is that the volume flushes into puts, not into calls. Why? They don't seem to last long, and everyone's trying to fade it. The other thing I noticed is that, we now have the VVIX below 110, a level it's not been able to hold below. So we're at kind of a key level. I'm really interested to see, where does option volatility go? Because I actually think one of the things stopping people from using the VIX to hedge, on top of the fact that it's remaining firmly above 15, is that call options are just really expensive. And if we get the VVIX back below 100, and folks that are newer listeners, if you had told me, and Mark for that matter, that 110 would become the low end of VVIX, to me and Mark back in early 2019 or 2018 or 2017 or 2016, we would have called you crazy.
Especially in 2017, I would have said you were insane.
I would have said you were absolutely bananas nuts. And yet, here we are. It's been a year, and the average VVIX has been about around 117%. So maybe when vol comes off in VIX, we'll start seeing some of these call traders come in.
The old rule of thumb for VVIX used to be, got down to about 75 on the downside. That's when you could start expecting it to bounce. That was usually a pretty reasonable floor for VVIX. We didn't see VIX vol get that much lower than that often, except for that mad year of 2017, obviously. And then on the upside, usually around 125, it starts getting up there. Hey, pay attention. Things are going to happen. And that was usually the range we saw it bouncing in all the time, 75 to 125. And then once March of last year hit, listeners, it pretty much hadn't been below 120 until not too long ago. So, yeah, it's been again, one of these other things that is unprecedented. I'm looking right now while you're talking, I'm looking at these Jan 24 puts. All right, they went up on Wednesday, 19,500 times in the first block. They obviously did more later. They paid $4.98 for these things, so nearly $5. If you're wondering, that's an 80 vol, listeners. Yeah, and then total more later on. Yeah, this is an interesting print here. And again, not what I expected playing out there in Jan, but it does. I'm talking about earlier about the farther out portion of the curve. That is one way to do it, and intriguing stuff. And then otherwise light week, those kind of trades are going to jump off the list here. What are your thoughts on playing in Jan right now, listeners, in VIX? Hit us up, let us know as we keep on rolling into a product that is once again rolling to the downside. So if you held on to this thing for the last couple of weeks hoping for some reversion, you're pretty much back to break even. It was up 3 points last week, and it's back down 3 points this week. I'm talking about VXX coming into showtimes at about 25 and 3/4. Let's see if it has come off a little bit since then. No, it's still about 25 and 3/4 out there. That's down exactly 3 points from where it was last week. Excuse me, if you listened to last week's show, you know it was up 3 points. So it's been 2 weeks of nothing. You can blame Powell and everybody else out. Well, maybe you can't blame Powell. We'll have to see what our what our audience poll is telling us for what you folks are blaming out there right now. On the tape today, about 180, actually, no, take it back now, about 214,000 contracts, a little bit more has drizzled in to VXX. Another one of these days, listeners, where the tail is wagging the dog, where VXX and some of these VIX ETPs are doing more paper than VIX itself. And we were talking about that last week, actually, with Matt and others. It's not exactly going to be an aberrant scenario going forward, at least for a little while. And at least so far, that appears to be the case. Let's look at a top 10 out here, see what's lighting it up out here in VXX. By the way, the ADV 212 right now is actually down about 5,000 from last week. But again, we're at 214 right now, so already through it. So probably going to be trending up next week. Let's see. Top 10, what are the size positions out here? VXX still kind of dominated by the pre-split adjusted VXX1 stuff. You see we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So pretty much half of the OI, the top 5, or top 10 really, are still a pre-split adjusted VXX1. So remember that when we're talking these top 10s here. Cost you 16,000 contracts to break into the top 10 in VXX. That gets you to the OCT28s. Number 9, 16,000 of the SEP23 puts. Number 8, 17,500 of the SEP24 puts. By the way, it's 60-40 puts to calls in VXX now as well. Number 7, 18,000 of our first VXX1. These are the Jan 12 puts. Then we go back to, actually, no, we stay in VXX1 for a little while here. 18,600 of the SEP14 puts. Number 5, 21,000 of the SEP14 calls. Again, VXX1. Number 4, 22, almost 23,000 of the SEP9 puts. Then we get back to old school VXX here, 23,400 of the SEP40s for number 3, 26,000 almost exactly of the SEP27 puts for number 2, and number 1 out there still, the VXX1 SEP10 calls with about 32,500 open out there. In terms of the active trades today, we got a lot of AUG going the way to Dodo today, lighting up the tape out there, 13,700 of the AUG, 26 calls, 11, almost 12,000 of the AUG 26 puts, and about 11,000 of the AUG 27 calls, all leading the dance today, all those going out today. Then we got 10,000 of the SEP 24 halves expiring next week, and then back to AUG again, 7,500 of the AUG 27 puts. So a lot of expiration day dancing going on out here in VXX, which is what you would expect on a day like today. Mr. Meatball, anything lighting up the tape or the tapes of your crazies in VXX this week, sir?
What I've noted was that, leading into today, and I did put this out on my blog that I do every day, leading into today, so last night, the 27.5 strangle with VXX trading 27.25 was going for 90 cents. So they were pricing the straddle about $1.15, and we've moved $1.50. The 30-day future that VXX represents is getting absolutely beaten. And it's like, been taken out to the woodshed and just slapped around. They are destroying VXX and UVXY to boot.
They are destroying it. We'll get to the UVXY now as well. Coming into showtime, that was at about 22.25. Let's see, is it still pretty much hanging out right around there? And let's see, down about 3 3/4, almost 4 points from last week. This has been an interesting one to watch as it's kind of flirted with that 23 strike all week. Got through it, bounced off it again, got through it again. So yeah, it's been a fascinating one to watch. I had some, I think, some 23 puts on. Yeah, they were fun to take off this week because you had some opportunities and they went away, and there's opportunities again. It just shows the fun dance that is vol trading these days, listeners. But again, coming at showtime, down almost 4 points from this time last week. The ADV is pretty much unched at 134,000, and actually right now there's exactly 134,000 contracts having traded so far today. So the ADV and today's volume lining up exactly. Let's do a top 5 out here because there isn't a ton of size in UVXY. Number 5, by the way, it's 60-40 calls to puts in the top 10 in UVXY. So still some love for the funky upside. We'll get to that in a second. Number 5 out here in UVXY, 7,500 of the AUG 23 puts. Again, if I say AUG, unless I tell you otherwise, it's going out today, listeners. Number 4, 7,500 of the AUG 25 calls. Number 3, our old friends, the AUG 70s, 7,800 of those. And then not to be outdone, remember we said last week, he had some regular AUG 70s that went out last week. What would this person, and I'm assuming it's the same person, it probably is, unless someone else got inspired to listen to this show. They decided, they're like to blast away at these AUG 70s. They were getting decent levels for one of these ones that I saw. So they decided to come back in. This time, go a little bit farther out. They went to the SEP 75s, our number 2 position. 8,700 of those bad boys, and number 1 with a bullet out there today, 9,300 of the UVXY 1, so our only pre-split adjusted position in the top 5. The Jan 1 puts out there. So, yeah, interesting stuff. Mr. Meatball, what are your thoughts on UVXY and the continued love for blasting away at the upside? This time, SEP 75s. I'm going to dig those up, see what they went up for, so while you're talking.
Yeah, that one was interesting. I've been looking at a lot of puts. I'm noticing there's a ton of paper today in puts that expired today. There's also some pretty decent activity in next week and the following. Pretty decent volume day, all things considered, for UVXY relative to VXX and VIX itself. Already about 100 over 100,000 have traded today already. So for UVXY, that's not bad.
These are interesting. Guess what these SEP 75s traded for? They traded on, looks like they first started trading on August 18th, sir. SEP 75 call, this ballpark, what you think they went for. Remember I told you they got the AUG 70s for 25 cents or so. I'm going to give you a hint. These are more.
I don't know, $2.
I'm sure he wishes. But 90 cents.
Oh, wow.
90 cents for the SEP 75 times. They traded 1,000 times on August 18th, and 790 more for 85 cents, and 200 more. Did a total of a couple of thousand that day for 85 to 90 cents. That's real money. You're not playing around at that point. My goodness. At the time, UVXY was 26.30, so a little bit higher than it is right now, but certainly nowhere near the 70. Maybe this guy's onto something. Maybe this crazy upside in UVXY is the land of hidden treasure. Maybe I should keep my mouth shut. I'm giving this guy's secret away, and our secret away for our new fund we're going to launch, Mr. Meatball, called Blasting Away at UVXY Upside. This guy's getting 90 cents for these things. My goodness. Interesting. Listeners, forget you heard that. You don't want to go out and hit these. Save those for the Meatball and I after the show. All right, let's keep on rolling here as we look here out to some single names. We're talking about some craziness going on afoot there throughout the week, and we have the numbers for you, listeners. Like I said, even our buddy Dan over on Options Bootcamp was mystified at how much earnings data we have available for free on our website. You know where to go to find out more, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on the Options News and Articles tab. That opens up a whole bunch of stuff there, and one of those is the earnings reports. Click on that. You can see everything. Earnings move results, and earnings season reports. So the earnings move are pretty much just the what's coming up in the future and what's being priced in and how it compares to historical. So you want to see what your name you're trading, what it's pricing in, how that compares, that kind of thing. That's all there. The earnings move results reports are how exactly what it says, how the earnings actually performed, what happened versus expectation. Then the season reports take all of that and aggregate that down into kind of a breakdown of the season week by week compared to historical and also an average for the entire season, and compares that to other seasons as well. So there's a whole heck of a lot of data. You can really sit there and mine a lot of it. And we really got to tip a cap to the folks at ORATS for making that all available for free for you folks, because they could easily charge for it. It's pretty useful stuff. So get in there before they realize how good it is. Theoptionsinsider.com, and click on that tab. And you could research. We have them all there going back years now. So you can really do a lot of interesting research there if you were so inclined. All right, moving on out here to this week. We had Best Buy, Intuit, and Nordstrom on Tuesday. Wednesday, we had Dick's, Salesforce, Snowflake, and Box. Thursday, Dollar General, Dollar Tree, Abercrombie & Fitch, Peloton, Marvel. Peloton, by the way, what a dumpster fire Peloton has been. What do we have? Kind of the trifecta of terrible things. You got accounting irregularities that no one likes, coupled with an SEC investigation. You got a DOJ investigation off of the child who tragically died with that. And then, of course, on top of that, you have kind of emergency price cuts. So Peloton, kind of the opposite of support.com right now in terms of not looking so bueno. Marvell, Gap, HP, and Dell. HP and Dell both getting impacted by the chip shortage out there these days. And today we have Big Lots We have these coming in through yesterday right now. We have new reports coming in soon from the folks at ORATS for today's stuff. Yesterday, we had Dollar Tree before the bell. They were at 106 and a third. They were pricing in 5.2%. They delivered 11.2%, so outperforming on the dollar store sector. Dollar General, they were at 234 and three quarters. They were pricing in 3.8%. They delivered about 6%. So both of the dollar store names outperforming and by more than double almost their earnings expectations. So a little bit more vol perhaps to be found in the dollar store sector. Interesting also how these, incredibly rising rates of inflation, how that's impacting a lot of these cheap goods out of China, which of course are the lion's share of the goods that Dollar General and Dollar Tree sells, how that's making and probably impacting their ability to keep that $1 price point. Probably a little bit more challenging these days. CRM, they were the story before Support.com took it over. They were moving quite a bit. They priced in 5.4%. And even though they moved a lot, they were pricing in a pretty hefty moves. They came in right around 5%. So they had a nice roughly 11 handle move, but that was not a ton compared to what they were pricing in. So they were pricing in some juice in Salesforce. And today it's up about a third of a percent. So still up from there, but looks like no, even if you held it through now, it's right around 5% So you pretty much would be in line with the straddle. Snowflake was on the 25th after the bell. They were at 283, almost 284 going into their announcement. They're pricing in 7.2%, and the former hot IPO underperforming from a vol perspective at about 5.2%. And also Box, they were pricing in 6.3%. They were at 25.64. They delivered 2.6%. So not a lot of juice in the online storage world. Ulta on the beauty side, let's see, they were right after the bell yesterday. They were at 389.90. They were pricing in 5.7%. They delivered a whopping 0.6%. So no juice at all to be found in the beauty segment. And so far, our season averaging out at 82%. Coming in a little bit, it was 84% last week. So coming in a little bit, but still the most robust season we've had pretty much since the start of the pandemic from an earnings perspective. Peloton, let's see, we have them going into their announcement. They were at 116 and a quarter. They were pricing in $9.04. Let's see. They're at 106. They sold off about $10. So they outperformed their straddle. Not as much as you might think. They're off about 7 and a quarter today. They're pricing in $9. In the past, they've moved 763. So they're pricing in a little bit more juice already. And then they still outperform that to buy an extra $1 or so. Let's look really quickly to Dell. Dell was at, 102, and they were pricing in $5. In the past, they've moved $3.75, and Dell off nearly $5, $4.59. So pretty close to their straddle right there as well. Hewlett Packard, I know they had similar issues to Dell. Let's just look really quickly if I can get my system to play ball with me. There we go. All right, so Hewlett Packard, $29.40. They were pricing in $1.72. In the past, they moved to $1.50, and looks like they got. There's a lot of noise about them. Looks like they got a lot of it back because they're only off 11 cents right now. So, So then once again, the premium sellers went out there. Straddle was nearly $2, and it's only moved 11 cents right now. Again, Peloton, we already talked about them. Let's go to Big Lots really quickly, see if the same thing that's impacting the dollar store is impacting them. Big Lots, $57.84. They're pricing in about $5. That's a little light because in the past they moved about $6. And let's see if I can. There we go. They're off right now. Looks like about exactly $6. So pretty much exactly in line with their previous straddles of $5.99. So they outperformed their straddle though. They about $1. So there you go. A little bit of action a little bit of juice to be found in the dollar side of the sector. Let's see what kind of juice can be found from your questions. It is time to check the volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options. or facebook.com/theoptionsinsider.
All right, everybody, we're coming up against it here in terms of this poll, so I want to make sure if you want to play, if you're listening after the fact, it probably will be too late. You only got about 2 hours left, but we'll just be pretty much wrapping up with oddities by then. But if you're listening live, and most of you I think have played already, but Get on out there. You got 2 hours left at options. We asked you this week, we've seen a lot of turbulence in the market recently. What do you feel is the main driver of this latest round of volatility? Gave you 4 choices: the Delta variant, Afghanistan, Fed tapering concerns, and market valuation concerns. A lot of you weighing in saying, what about an all of the above? Yeah, I wish, but that's A, cop-out, and B, there's only 4 choices allowed in Twitter. So all of you asking for that, we cannot. Mr. Meatball, have your thoughts evolved at all? What do you think is driving this? And more importantly, what do you think our audience is voting for, sir?
No, my thoughts have not changed. And I believe, what did I say? What did I say on Monday?
Pretty sure you said tapering.
Yeah. Well, I mean, tapering is not going to matter. That's all I'll say there.
Well, our audience thinks it was, at least it was going into today, because 54.5% have chose Fed tapering concerns. 19.8% for number 2, Delta variant, 13.9% number 3, market valuation concerns, and 11.9% for Afghanistan. You got about 2 hours left. I got to imagine it's going to shake out somewhere along those levels. If you vehemently disagree, get in there, make your voice heard. Now, really quickly, I want to pay off the one we talked about last week that was vol-oriented. We discussed it on the show. We said which of these 4 products has the highest 30-day volatility, and we gave you 4 choices: Bitcoin, VIX, crude oil, or Tesla. We start off the show every week, listeners, with VVIX. We just talked about it earlier with Mark, what range it's been in. It's not an exact measure, but it's a good approximation for what the 30-day vol is for VIX. So if we're hearing us talking about nothing but triple digits for the better part of the last year, that should resonate in your brain that VIX is a little volatile. So we gave you Bitcoin, VIX, crude oil, and Tesla. You guys chose Bitcoin by about 50% exactly, followed by number 2, VIX, 21%. Crude oil, number 4, actually, with 13%, and about 16% for Tesla. When we posted it, the vols were as stated here. VIX was at 105%. Tesla was at about 41%. Bitcoin was at 85%, and WTI was at 35%. So clearly, VIX is the most volatile. Bitcoin has the best chance of those 4 to usurp it. It has broken into the low triple digits a few times, but nothing really sustainable. And VIX has just lived there for the better part of the last year. All right, we got a bunch of questions from the live chat here. Let's go to Mr. Unlimited first. He wants to know, does the Meatball think the Apple 150 September 3rd strikes, these are what we were just talking about, all those 150 calls, Mr. Meatball, are going to do a lot of paper again on Monday, like the previous 2 weeks? Yeah, we talked about that. You know, somebody was just piling into all these weekly Apple 150s, 155s, and 160s. Looks like that one didn't work out too well for them. Stock's at 148.5 this week. I can look and see if the lion's share were buying. I think they're buying. So A, what are your thoughts on the performance of those this week, Mr. Meatball? And then B, Mr. Unlimited wants to know, do you think they're going to do it again this week?
Yeah, I mean, this volume has been insane in Apple. 4 strikes all week have represented about a third of all the option contracts that have been trading every day. The 49s, the 149s, the 150s, the 152.5s, and 155 calls collectively have been a third of the volume Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so far today. They did it last week. I'm really interested to see whether they're going to do it again, because that seems to be what's really driving things.
All right, and Luigi's in there. He wants to know, he's thinking of dabbling in a couple of strangles in UVXY and SVXY 1 week out. So weekly strangles. What would the Meatball think? Well, I'm guessing you want to buy those, Mr. Luigi? I don't know. Mr. Meatball, what are your thoughts on buying weekly strangles in UVXY and SVXY 1 week out?
I don't really like SVXY very much. UVXY, that makes some sense to me. Just buying strangles because, as you know, the stock can definitely move.
The stock can move.
I don't think it's a terrible idea. If you're going to sell them, I don't like that idea at all.
Let's go to one. Let's go to one that came in last week. You're getting a lot of love in the show today, Mr. Meatball. It's Rhythmic Angel. He says, "Hello, Mark Sebastian on episode 458." I love when they get specific with the episode number, and they got a specific question there. He said, "I believe said to watch out for the VIX expiry last day as the cash index was still lower than the future expiring in 1 day. Could you please let us know if you found something interesting now that the event has passed? What gave finally, and was there a trade to begin with? You cannot buy, sell the index right So, yes, you cannot buy or sell the cash index there, Rhythmic. So, was there a trade to do something with the VIX future before expiration looking at the cash? Many thanks, as always. He usually writes into our TWIFO show, so he's more of a futures guy. So I'm guessing he's coming at it from a futures and futures options perspective. Remember, going into the expiration, Mark, on the Friday before, we were saying how elevated things were versus the cash and how that discrepancy, that disparity, something had to happen. So what are your thoughts now that it's in the rearview mirror of what happened and what you could have done going into it, sir?
We ended up not really getting we ended up getting a big pop on Monday, you'll recall, and that put a damper on that trade, unfortunately. So it expired. It did not expire with a lot of edge in it, I will say, unfortunately.
Yeah, these little aberrant spikes we get every now and then, they do tend, pun intended, spikes. They do tend to gum up the works sometimes, and that is what happened. That was that week, as you recall, Rhythmic and everyone else, where we were talking about, we had that weird spike on Monday morning, as I recall. Then it kind of faded right away, and it was the traditional. I remember it because I think I had some upside at the time, and I had the traditional, you had 2 seconds to get it. Then we saw another sell-off on Tuesday morning, and we saw vol pop again, but then the same thing, it faded almost instantaneously again. And then we saw kind of the sell-off kind of kicking in and the vol coming back down. And then we saw what is unusual. We saw the second leg of the sell-off later on Tuesday. So we saw the follow-through that we normally don't get. And that's what caused vol to pop to that next level. And then, of course, that was going right into expiration on Wednesday. So unless you kept all of your upside until the final minutes before expiration, you probably missed out on some decent juice on the upside. Then, of course, we lamented that week. Expiration was, of course, Wednesday. And then we saw the big pop after that. So that was one of those weeks where most people wished VIX expired on Friday. I certainly was one of them. So, yeah, that was a bit of a weird week, Rhythmic. It didn't play out the way anyone thought it would and the way it normally does. So we saw a lot of weird, aberrant things on top of each other. And speaking of weird, aberrant things on top of each other, it's time to get into the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crystal ball. This is the portion of the show where we attempt to wrestle with the slippery pig known as volatility. Pleased to see so many of you are jumping in and playing along with us. It's fun, isn't it? And also very challenging, as you have probably discovered out there right now. Coming into the start of the show, we had about 16.5 on both of the VIX cash and the spikes. That was down about 2 points, so we were hanging out in the 18.5 range this time last week, listeners. And spikes is still around that level, right around 1640 or so, 1643. And VIX cash has come off a little bit down to about a 1630 or so. So that's where we're coming in to the crystal ball. And actually, as I say that, Mr. Meatball, your ridiculous, actually, I guess, expressing your book this time, not fading it, actually looking pretty good. You were at a 1616. Like I said, we're pretty much about a tenth of a little more than that, about 0.15 away. But you know what? Since it's been so long since you've had a winner chicken dinner, I'm going to give that one to you. That's nice. I'll give you a bullseye. So well done to you, sir. Matt was feeling more vol this week. Matt Amberson from Orats. He was at a 20 even. I was a little bit less than him, but I was still feeling a little bit more vol, which, of course, we saw as recently as not that long ago. And then, of course, it all went away. So, yeah, we were at my level, pretty close to it, just yesterday. Again, that shows you how challenging the VIX gods are out there. I was at a 1935. We were pretty much at that yesterday. But now, yeah, 1616. Mr. Meatballs looks like it's winner chicken dinner. Let's see if anybody else has any winners out there. JJ 1746. Nice guess. Not quite for you. Meats, Mr. Meats with a Z. Another one of our pro members out there. 1533. About a point off. Not bad there. Alan, 16 double. He's about a quarter away and less on spikes, so not bad. From a spikes perspective, he may be 0.15 away or so. He might be challenging you, Mr. Meatball. Henry at a 14.99, didn't get a 14 handle this week. Nichols, 18.65. That was kind of closer to my range, not quite there. Options Queen said I was too low last week. So she was going for Luigi's guess in the week before for this week. That was your first mistake, following Luigi. She was at a 22. So again, a little bit optimistic on the vol front, even though we were not that far away from it this week. Luigi was at, he was holding firm, 22.35. Unlimited was going back down to 16.01. Oh, not looking bad there, Mr. Unlimited. Looking pretty good there as well. So, but Mr. Meatball, we have some others in there that were kind of outside the range of. But if you guys want to play along, you know how to find us at Options on all the social medias, questions at theoptionsider.com. If you're, of course, a secret club member, you could play along live like a lot of people like to do as well. It's fun. And hey, if you're good, if you win, maybe some sweet prizes coming your way. Speaking of sweet prizes, everyone's got the box. They're ready to go out. It's just we had to commission the shirts, so we're waiting for those to be finished and sent to us. And once those are here, remember, we go the extra mile for you folks. We don't just get crappy stuff. We get premium like Land's End custom gear and stuff. So that's all coming for you. Once we get it, the boxes will go out. So that's coming. And then, so we got good stuff coming up for this week. All right, so Mr. Meatball, long way around to you are the winner chicken dinner for this week. I will give you pride of place, sir. Where do you want to be this time next week?
All right. Well, it's time to fade my book again. I'm going to go 1824.
You know what happens? You know what happens when you don't fade your book? It works out pretty well. Maybe you should stop fading the book. All right, 1824 for the Meatball. So we're at about a 1630 in VIX, 1625, and about 1640 odd in Spikes right now. Again, this is one of those weird ones. We have Jackson Hole out. So what's the next driver? What's the next crazy shoe that's going to drop on a Monday or Tuesday that pops us back up again? All right, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to say a little bit more vol, but not a ton. I'm going to say 1715. Oh, we got our first listener guest. He says he wants to go first. Luigi says, the Fed is out of the bag. VIX will be 1785. Okay, interesting. Get your votes in now, listeners. If you want to play listening after the fact, hit us up. We'll put you in the notes for next week. And if you're good, if you're a bullseye, maybe a winner chicken dinner for you. All right, we got to get on out of here. But don't worry, listeners. If you're in the secret club, you can hang out here. We'll play some live stuff. We'll be back in exactly an hour with, I do believe, the Rock Lobster to break down the week's worth of unusual, crazy activity out there on Options Oddities. But before we go, Mr. Meatball, if folks are intrigued, they want to hit you up about support.com and the Gamma Radar, all that fun stuff, where should they go? What should they do?
You guys know the drill. You go to optionpit.com and you look up good old Mark Sebastian. You read my blog, The VIX Edge, every day, and you will be a happy camper. Learn all kinds of awesome information. If you like this show, it's basically a mini tidbit of a segment that we do on this show every day. So come and check it out.
Good old Mark Sebastian. That's what his blog is called. Look for the good old Mark Sebastian blog over there at optionpit.com. Unlimited keeps tilting at that 1492 windmill. He says we're going to hit it this week. 14. You keep wanting to discover that new level of volatility. So once again, we'll see if you're right this week, Mr. Unlimited. You guys know where to go to learn more about all things spikes. MyAxOptions.com/spikes. It's got historical data. It's got current data. It's got releases. You want to know about these records for the futures and everything else? It's all there, including a link to a cool show called Vol Views. What more could you possibly ask for? And of course, back again later today for Options Oddities, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. And then back again next week, another episode of Volatility Views. We'll see you then.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MyAx, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MyAx is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at myaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.